Hello beautiful teachers and welcome to another Vibrant Music Teacher Chat, where today we're talking all about performance anxiety, addressing it in yourself and in your students. If you haven't met me before, my name is Nicola Canton and I am the creator of Vibrant Music Teaching, as well as a piano teacher myself in Dublin in Ireland. So that's where this voice comes from. If you're like, I can't place that accent. I know it's not very Irish, but I promise you it is an Irish accent. So today we're talking about performance anxiety, but we're going to do some warm-ups first. And before we get to those, I wanted to let you know a little bit of news, because I know this is something I've been asked about a lot, so I just wanted to put out a sort of PSA about it. So this right here, this lump that was behind me, I'm going to hold up as much as I can. I'm going to step back to do this. Okay, you saw most of it. It's a piano blanket. So it has two pianos, that's why one is upside down. Okay, I'm going to hold it like this. Yeah, so there's that one. And then when you put it the other way up, there's a larger version. So I did it with two kind of flipped opposite ways on either side. So you can either fold it in half or use both or just use one side of it. So it is a fleecy blanket. I decided to put this together because we already have a grand staff version, if you haven't seen that before, because I wanted a solution for people who don't really like to sew or can't sew and don't like DIYing things. Because my floor staff that I use in my studio, I created myself. It's like a quilted kind of blanket with ribbon applique to make the treble clef and the bass clef and the staff lines. So I wanted a solution for people who don't want to do that themselves. And that's why we put together the floor staff blanket, because I can get them printed very easily in Europe and in the US, so it kind of delivers to you from a little bit closer, which makes it easier. And I realized we should have a piano one as well, because that's another thing people ask for a lot and another thing that I have made myself for our studio. So yeah, that's the piano blanket. There's a slightly smaller one than this. This is the Mahusive one. It's very big. And there's a slightly smaller one. If you're interested in either of those, you can find them on the Colourful Keys shop. So it's colourfulkeys.ie/shop, or just Google Colourful Keys shop. Even if you spell it wrong, it'll probably come up. And that is our piano blanket. And we have the staff ones there as well. Just wanted to let you know about that. Now, we're going to warm up together. So if you haven't done this with us before, you're in for a treat. We're going to start with some solfa singing. Alright, so for these ones we sing in solfa. That's what I recommend you do. However, if you're not comfortable with solfa, then you can just hum. You can say do, whatever you like. What we're going to do today is we're going to do it the way I usually do it with students. So what I usually do with students is I point. So I'm going to point with my mouse here. I would point with a pen at my screen. I keep meaning to take out my drumstick because that's actually easier to point with. But anyway, I would point with a pen, but I'll use my mouse here on screen. So we just go through and say what the solfa is. Now, obviously, I'll say it here, but kind of say it to yourself at home. And in my studio, you can imagine that my students would be saying this, not me. I would only chime in if they got stuck or said the wrong thing. So I start by saying just, if this is la, what is this? They say so, mi, re, do, re, mi. So, oops. So, la, so, mi, re, mi, so. Okay, once they get a little bit more used to it, I have them do it kind of in the rhythm. Again, just speaking it. Although some students, and one student did this yesterday actually in my studio, instinctively sing it. And that's great if they sight sing it. Like, he actually accurately sight sung the whole thing, which just proves that the work is working. But yeah, just saying it is fine. It's a great first step for students who are a bit cautious about the whole solfa singing thing. At least they've gotten a chance to puzzle out what the syllables are going to be. And then we try it with the slow track. So we'll try that now. There's going to be a tonic chord and a starting note, and then a 1 bar, 1 measure count in. So give it a go. Whether you use a solfa or not, give it a go. Okay, and then immediately after that we try the faster track as well. Let's go. Oh! Thank you, Rachel. You can't hear the backing track. Let me try one thing, otherwise we might have to skip these for today. Because the sound was being weird earlier. I thought I'd fixed it. This might make it worse, so let's just try it for a second. This is what live streams are all about. Let me know if you heard that or not. Change some settings there. Otherwise, we can skip the rhythm railroad, so just let me know about that. But yeah, that's my process for working through the solfa railroad, so hopefully you understood what I was saying. Even if you didn't hear those backing tracks, we say it with me pointing, then we all sing it together. Great, you could hear that. Okay, so it seems like it's fixed. I'll know that for next time. Hopefully I'll remember that setting. Then we sing it together with the slow track. Then we sing it together with the faster track. Okay? Right. Let's give our rhythm railroad warm-up a go. So this is clapper, which is the third level of rhythm railroad. We're going to practice it again the same way I do it with students. So the first thing we do depends on the student's level a little bit. If they are pretty comfortable with metric counting, we will do that. If they are not, and they're using Kadai syllables mostly, we will do that. So let's try metric counting here. Yesterday I challenged two of my buddy students who have the overlapping lessons. They had to do one where we kind of worked it out together, and then the next one they had to count it metrically just as them without me. So I often do that if we're doing two. Do one where we all do it, and then the second one I challenge them to do it on their own if they are, a couple of years into lessons. Okay, so let's try counting it and doing the actions with me. Yellow is touch your head, red is touch your heart. The turquoise is one hand taps. The foot is obviously a foot, the green one. Okay, so it goes 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. Okay, so that's how we would practice it first. And often it's a bit messier because my students are trying to figure out the counting as well. Then we try it with the slow one. Kind of a creepy one, right? Students often like the creepiest backing tracks. Super fun. Okay, the faster one. Give it a go. If you haven't tried any of the others, give this a go. It's your last chance. By the way, don't be embarrassed if you do try these and your students are better than you. That does happen. Often kids are better at picking up coordination things a little bit quicker than us adults. Often I'm in time but get the action wrong, and they are out of time but get the action right. That's often the way it goes. So it's a good way to learn how to prioritize the rhythm. Okay, that is Rhythm Railroad Level 3. If you're a member of Vibrant Music Teaching, you can find that inside the library. Now it's time to head into our main topic of the day. Okay, so today we are talking about performance anxiety. And this is something that I've certainly dealt with plenty. So a little bit of backstory on me. I had 3 main sort of piano teachers as I grew up. I had one for the first few years who was not the best fit for me. Didn't have an amazing relationship. She didn't really seem to enjoy my company, and I didn't practice, probably because of that. Not to blame her too much, I also didn't practice. I mean, that's fair. Then I had another teacher who was very lovely and very nice. Both of those were like solo teachers teaching out of their home. And in Ireland, it's pretty unusual for teachers who are solo teachers to do any kind of recitals. Because we have this strong exam culture, focus tends to be on that more than concerts or recitals. So I didn't have any of that until I moved teachers again at age 15. And then suddenly I had to do 2 recitals a year in that new studio because it was like a bigger school, multi-teacher school, still exists down the road from me here. And it was a shock to the system. So if you started performing young, I'm jealous of you. Maybe you'll say, actually, I would prefer to have started at age 15. But a lot of the teachers I talk to say, oh my gosh, that must have been so hard. And I think it probably was, especially as quite a quiet, shy teenager. It was pretty excruciating, but I was expected to perform. And so I did. And I felt like every recital that I did, it just got worse. My hands got shakier and shakier, and I felt less and less prepared, even though I was probably equally prepared in terms of the actual piece. And it just was not an amazing experience. In fact, I didn't really learn to deal with the performance anxiety until performing at my own students' recitals. Not ideal, but that is when I started to overcome all of this. And for me, I think a lot of it was learning to improvise, learning to memorize, because those were all non-memorized pieces. That wasn't really a big thing with any of the teachers that I took from. Memorization was not expected. I think I could have benefited from learning that earlier. And yeah, eventually I worked my way around it. I'm still not a born performer. It's not my thing. It's not my favorite thing to do, and I won't seek it out, but I will, play at my students' recitals. I think that's important to do, and it's good for my own development as well. So that's where I stand with my own performance anxiety, but I've dealt with a much broader spectrum of it within my students, and I'm sure it might be that way for you too. So some of my tips for dealing with this that I've come across over the years that I've built up in my repertoire of dealing with students, and I would love to hear yours. I think the first thing to think about, and the first thing that I maybe got wrong in the beginning of working on this, was not looking it in the eye. As in, when working with students, I would kind of skirt around it. I wouldn't mention nerves unless they brought it up, because I was afraid of planting the idea in their head that they could be nervous or that they should be nervous. And I don't think that's always the right approach. I think sometimes I still agree with my former self with that when it comes to really young students, because I think it often doesn't occur to them that they should be nervous. And so if they don't seem it and they don't bring it up, sometimes I don't bring it up with them. But with my older students, and I'm talking age, 7 or 8 and higher, I think it's really important to have this honest conversation. Look the performance anxiety in the eye. We can deal with it so much better if we really talk about what it means. Talk about all the feelings associated with feeling nervous or feeling anxious about a performance. So what happens? Get your student to describe their experience as well. You can start with yourself to give them some examples. Before a performance, I've already mentioned, I tend to get shaky hands if I'm particularly nervous, which is obviously very inconvenient if you play piano. Your heart rate increases, maybe you get sweaty, maybe you breathe more shallow breaths, maybe you feel sick. I know many people will, or various things like that, right? And try to get your student to tell you theirs. And don't say, well, you shouldn't feel like that, or you shouldn't be nervous. There's nothing to be nervous about. I think that's the wrong approach. I think we need to face it square in the eye and say, yeah, this is probably going to happen. If I have felt like this in the past, or I'm feeling like this now about the performance, I'm not going to magically disappear these feelings. This is my body's reaction to this perceived threat or stress. And I know it's not really a threat, but I need to deal with it squarely, face on, rather than skirting it or pushing it under the rug, right? So how do we deal with it? I think the first great strategy for this is movement. This seems so silly, and often it's the last thing we want to do when we're feeling nervous about a performance. We don't want to get up and dance around or move around, do we? Because our body is saying, no, you're about to deal with something terrifying, you need to conserve your energy, probably. But actually, one of the best things we can do is to move a bit. So we can start practicing this with students in their lessons by making it part of the start of the lesson routine. And this is something I need to be more consistent about. I do it and I go through a period of being really good about it. And then I start getting impatient to prioritize other things. But I know I'm wrong when I do that. We should start with movement every time. And this can be just as simple as like some sway, side to side, swinging the arms around, maybe rolling down and touching your toes, or as close as you can get, and rolling back up again. And then some basic stretches, stretching the fingers, rolling the shoulders back, maybe doing some swimming, right? So all of these things can help to, yes, prepare the body for actually performing, which is what we want, but also they can alleviate some of the performance anxiety symptoms that we might have. Hands getting cold is a really common one. So improving your circulation by jumping about a bit, swinging your arms, maybe even doing some jumping jacks can be really helpful. Often we are feeling just like low energy or like shy about it. This can get us out of our heads a little bit, and I think it's really helpful to do. Movement can also help to regulate our breathing because we focus on the movement, and therefore our breathing naturally falls into a better rhythm for us. So I think starting with movement is a great way to approach some of the basic performance anxiety symptoms. I think breath is the next one, and a lot of us will talk about this. I was reading a little book today about performance anxiety, and in it she talked about the term deep breathing not being always so helpful, and I kind of agree. I prefer slow breathing. I prefer to focus on the length of time. Like, I'm not actually saying to students breathe more slowly, but getting them to count their breaths in and out to try and make that even. To try and make the inhales and the exhales more even. So counting in for 3 and out for 3, and then in for 4 and out for 4. Another strategy which I haven't tried but was mentioned in this book was about holding your breath, retaining the breath, which is something we do in yoga. So breathing in for 4, holding your breath for 2, and breathing out for 4, holding your breath for 2, and kind of working on that. It's just about regulating the breathing. Another part of the breathing is focusing on where your breath is going. A lot of us, when we do get nervous, or just because of habits or whatever, we tend to breathe into our chest. And what we need to do is breathe more into the belly. I find is more helpful than talking about the diaphragm and getting into technicalities. Just thinking about breathing deep into the belly is helpful. So this is what is really meant by deep breaths, but sometimes it can cause students to take really big breaths, and that's not always what we want. We don't want more air, because then students can sometimes gulp air. People can kind of gulp air, and we don't want that. We just want it to be more into the diaphragm. So saying breathe into your belly can often be really helpful, especially for kids who aren't going to understand diaphragm. One way that I work on these breath elements is a sequence called Breath of 5. Many members might be familiar with this. Let me know if you have used this, if you're in the chat and you've used our Breath of 5. So this is a little video with a sequence to get you ready, and the breathing gradually gets longer and longer through the sequence. So if you haven't checked it out and you're a member, look for Breath of 5. It's a great way to start all your lessons. The next one is vision. And this is a funny one, but I'd like to take us away from the piano for a second and think about computer screens. I'm sure during the pandemic you might have heard that since we were all spending so much time on screens, it was causing issues with eyesight or like tension headaches and that kind of thing. And it's because if we focus on one one distance. So if we're focusing here all day, our eyes get way more tired than if we're like we would have been on the savannah, focusing on the horizon, looking out further into the distance. So taking breaks from the screen every so often to just focus way out in the distance, or as far as you can look I'm looking past the camera to just show you what I mean. But in my office, that's not very far because I have a load of stuff blocking my way. But even focusing on the far wall is something I try to do. Or I turn to the side and I have a window over here and I look out at the greenery in my garden. Now, if we bring this back to piano, what can often happen when we are in a performance situation is we feel like we get kind of tunnel vision. Have any of you ever felt this before? We feel like we get so hyper-focused in a way that we weren't in our practice time, and it can throw us off. Like, we feel like we're not seeing all of the sheet music the way we used to, or we're not able to focus on the width of the keys, or when we do take our vision away from the keys, we get completely thrown off. And it just doesn't happen during practice time. And a lot of this is this hyper-focus that occurs when we're trying to deal with this potential stress or this fight or flight situation, right? So let's get our students in the habit of focusing at a further distance. And I think we can do this at the same time as focusing on those breath techniques or doing the movement. Encouraging them to do it at a window. And you can do this in your studio if you have a window. Stand at a window with them when you're doing these movement activities and try and look out to the horizon. You can pick something on your landscape. So on mine, we're just looking out over a bunch of houses and then a park. So if we could pick the green dot of the park that we can kind of see out my window, that would be a great spot to focus on. And it just means it takes their vision into a different plane before we sit down and practice. And then that's something they can carry through into a recital hall when they're sitting there waiting to go up. They can purposefully focus their attention further out rather than staring down at their hands, which is like the same distance as their score is about to be. Sounds like a little thing, but see if it makes a difference. The next one is related in words, but not really. And that is visualization. So many of you might have heard this advice already in terms of preparing for performances or learning pieces in general, that we should try to visualize them, do visualization practice. So this is where we take a moment to close our eyes or just let our gaze blur and really picture ourselves playing it the way we want to play it. And picture every finger going to the right note. You can start this with students who can't quite achieve this if they're a little bit younger in a few different ways. So you can take smaller sections and you can have them play it and then visualize playing it and then play it again. Or you can put on a recording of it or play it yourself and have them visualize playing along. Right? So they can start to train their mind's eye to be able to practice in this way. And then you can start to visualize the actual performance venue. Because one of our inconvenient things about being pianists is that we're going to play on a strange piano and it's going to be completely different acoustically. That's the same for every instrument. But we have all these other factors to contend with that make it even more nerve-wracking to have to go and play on a strange piano in this strange environment in front of all these people without getting to warm up on the piano first if we can't. But we can look at a picture of that hall and imagine ourselves walking up to the piano and imagine or even listen to examples of how the sound is going to sound different. It's going to echo wider across this hall or whatever. And you can listen to those examples together with your student. How far you go with this is going to depend on how much performance anxiety your student is dealing with, but it's good to have lots of different approaches to try and make it as comfortable as possible for your students. Okay, my final tips then. Speak it. Talk it through, as in speak the unspeakable. So I already said we should look it square in the eye and talk about it openly, but I think we should also get our students to give voice to the catastrophe. If you do have students who are very nervous about performances or a particular one, ask them what the worst thing that could happen is. And initially they'll say, oh, I don't know. Get them to really describe it. What is the worst thing? And then you can really amp it up together. And you can say, oh, and then the ground is going to open up and you're going to disappear into the core of the earth, right? You can get really silly with it. But you can start to give voice to this and see that actually this is pretty unlikely. And with the things that could happen, like I forget my piece in the middle, well, what are we going to do if that happens? Let's come up with a backup plan. And let's practice making that mistake and then fixing the issue. It's not going to be the end of the world, right? But we have to speak these things aloud. We remove a lot of the power of our anxieties and our worries by just talking about them, giving voice to them. Next, we need to prepare. Obviously, we're going to be more anxious, more likely to actually mess up, make mistakes, forget our pieces, whatever the worry is. If we don't know our pieces, we need to know them extremely well for a performance. That's why when my students are performing for a recital, generally we pick something that they already know. And then we work in the preparation in the 6 weeks lead up to that recital. We just polishing it and getting performance ready with it. Because that's a different level of preparation and it's a different type of preparation. So we need to actually prepare that piece so that we know it so well so that your students can start at several different spots during it. If they're memorizing it, they have what Graham Fitch would call super starting spots that you can jump to, right? That they can jump to immediately. And a tip from Christina Whitlock, which I think comes from her college professor, don't quote me on that, is this idea of practicing a memorized piece and then just saying jump. And they have to jump to the next super starting spot. This is the term I often use, SSS. They have to jump to the next possible starting spot so that if they do lose their place, they know they can do that. They know they can jump forward and continue, and the non-musicians in the audience might not even notice. And then finally, practice. And I don't mean practice as in the preparation we were just talking about. I'm talking about practicing being nervous. This is the biggest one that helped me, is forcing myself to actually practice the nervousness part. So getting your students, or doing it in the lesson as well, record themselves. Record a video. And that feels like a performance. So you get nervous, find ways to deal with it. Walk through the preparation process together for that performance. You know, the breathing, the movement, all the other things we talked about. And then practice being nervous and playing anyway. And keep practicing it. We're not going to get better at dealing with nerves if we don't practice dealing with nerves. So recording videos is great for that, or just audio also works. Getting the teddy bears out and having them be an audience. Getting their mum to sit in on the lesson just for that performance, or getting them to play for various family members over the phone or over Zoom. Any opportunity to put themselves in the way of nervousness and find ways through it is going to help prepare them for these concerts, recitals, exams, whatever it is they're going to be facing. So I hope those tips give you a starting place. There's no magic cure-all, and I certainly don't have all the answers for this either, so I'd love to hear your thoughts and how you've dealt with performance anxiety, any particular routines, warm-up routines, ways of practicing that have helped you. Okay, I decided to put on a cozy fake hoodie today. If it keeps flashing, I'll change it, because it was doing an annoying flash there. Oh, it really is. It looks like a ghost. Let's pick something else before we continue. How about this cheeky beret? Okay, so we're going to do the questions now. If you do have a question, just start with the word question, and I'm happy to stick around and answer any that come up. I have a couple here already. So Rachel asked, I have a student that can't follow the music if I'm not pointing to each note as they play it. How can I work on their tracking skills? Honestly, Rachel, I think you're already working on them as much as you can. That is the best thing. And let me know how long it's been, okay? But that is the best thing that I've seen for my students who have poor tracking skills, is just that. Tracking with the pen for them. Having parents do that at home. It might seem like it's going to be a crutch. that they're then going to rely on. But I've found that over time they just stop needing it because their eyes learn because your pen has been tracking. If you want a sort of intermediate step, one little tiny adjustment to make is to start having your pen move constantly. So instead of note, 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 note like that, Rachel, it would just be flowing, like as the music flows, right, in the time, in the rhythm, flowing along, so that they get used to more what our eye movement is doing. Now we do jump from note to note, but I think you get what I'm saying. So yeah, that's the main thing, is just doing more of that. If you are talking about a student who has had this issue for years and years, I would look at other potential causes. So if I would try and find out what exactly is happening. Say the student is 10 and has been doing this for 3 years, okay? Let's just say that's what's happening. Well, then I would look at, okay, so when I don't point with the pen, are they literally just looking at the window? In which case they have trouble with focusing on it. Are they kind of moving randomly around the page? In which case it might be a more general reading issue. So you could try something simple. Well, first talk to them and ask them, like, when you look at the page, or the notes seem in a logical order? Does it look nice and clean and clear to you, or does it look a bit messy? And they might end up describing to you that the notes feel like they're moving around or something like that. And then a coloured overlay or coloured sheet music might be helpful. But that's in an extreme example. In most cases, just pointing along, letting them have that for even 6 months, a year, they'll stop needing it. They'll just naturally learn the pattern. Sandra, what type of piece do you play for your students' recital? I usually only play if there is a duet to play with a student. So yeah, I used to be the same as you, Sandra. And then a few years ago I decided, no, you know what, I want to do as I say. Like, I have students who are not... I have students who love performing, and I also have students who are somewhere in between, and I do have some who push themselves to do it because I tell them it's a good idea. I never force anyone, but they want to do it, but they really find it quite uncomfortable, and so they're me. And if that's the case for them, we can only get better by doing it more. So I do play, by the way, if anyone's wondering, I play first, not last. Teachers often ask about that. I like to play at the start. I consider myself the warm-up act, not the headliner, and I always start by saying that we never want anyone to have to be the first one to play, so teachers always play first. In regards to what I play, it depends on the recital. So, let me see. For example, last year we had like a Christmassy one, and oh no, I didn't play for that one because it was online, sorry. But last year we had one where students were doing like special requests pieces that mean something to someone in their life, like their parents or sister or friend or whoever they asked. And so we being me and the other teachers, each played a piece that meant something to us. In some way, I played All You Need Is Love by the Beatles. It was a Philip Keverin arrangement. So his arrangements are lovely. So I played that. Previously, I've done something I just felt like working on, like a bit of Mendelssohn, or let me see, what else was there? I can't remember who that's by right now. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Another composer, like classical music. But in recent years, as I'll say on this, in recent years, I have played an ensemble piece with the other teachers who work here. So last May, there was 3 teachers, including me, working here, so 2 others, and we played 2 different trios. We found an arrangement of Mamma Mia, which was quite challenging and a bit messy on my part, but we did it and it was fun. And we also played Outstanding, which is so much fun. It's by, someone could tell me who it's by? I've forgotten his name right now. I know it's a he. Anyway, Outstanding. Kevin Olsen. Isn't that right? I think so. So we played that, and it's really fun because one person has to like stand up and play at the top and the bottom and in the middle, and they kind of go between the two players. So I did that awkward part. And the other two teachers get to sit down. So yeah, a whole variety of stuff. Really anything I'm enthusiastic about playing is a shorter answer. Sorry if I was rambling for a long time there, but I hope it gives you some idea of what I choose to play. Okay, let me just check up with the general chat in case there were any questions there. Yes, right? That's always the case for me, and I hadn't really analyzed it or given like a name to it, but that's exactly what it feels like, this tunnel vision. You're welcome. Happy to help. Yeah, the jump technique. Can't take credit for that. That's the wonderful Christina Whitlock who passed that on to me, but I think it's something that maybe goes around if she got it from her college professor. So I love that. I try to do that, especially with more advanced students or students who memorize by just playing something over and over and over, and then they've kind of memorized it, but in a recital it might go horribly wrong. It's a great way to take it back to, okay, let's make sure this is really memorized. Yeah, Rachel. Okay, good to get some more context there. Yeah, playing less than 6 months, I wouldn't worry about it. I'd just keep going. Make sure you're pointing from above, standing up to the side of the piano, pointing down from above, not pointing up from underneath so that your hand is in the way. But otherwise, I'd just keep going for now. I wouldn't worry until it's like over a year or the student is a bit older. Okay, thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed our chat today. I had a lovely time as always, and I will be back here at the same time next week, so I hope to see you all there. Bye everyone.